Where would the Cincinnati Reds be in 2024 without Santiago Espinal?
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, and I am a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan. Seriously, got the baby pictures and Reds gear to prove it. And I've been hosting this podcast for the better part of 6 seasons now. I'm also the channel manager for the Locked On MLB channel, and I want to make Locked On Reds for everybody. I want to talk about the biggest things in Reds country. We want to dive into some statistics, and we'll make them make sense, give you plenty of context there, because quite frankly, math was never my strong suit, so I read up on all the numbers. And we will just overreact to the daily motions of the MLB Ocean in the 162. I want to thank you for making Locked On Reds part of your day. Locked On Reds is, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day, your Cincinnati Reds every single day. And I'm getting this podcast out a little bit later than I wanted to here on this Tuesday. Been dealing with a sick puppy, and Steve's out of town, so it was just me solo, and wanted to get this out a little bit earlier, but that's all right. It's an off day on Tuesday, and we're talking about a couple of wins here for the Reds, but more importantly, there are some injury updates. We'll get to those here in a few minutes, because there's definitely been a lot of key members of the team that have been out. I have a little bit of an existential baseball fan crisis that we'll work through a little bit later on in today's show, but I've got to start first with the greatness. Yes, I said it. The greatness of Santiago Espinal. That's all coming up on today's podcast that is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we will get started today is the fact, hey, look, let's celebrate just for a moment that the Reds have won back-to-back games since when they swept the Cardinals. Yeah, since August 12th, 13th, and 14th. They actually won the last game of the Brewers series that kind of led into that. So they won 4 games in a row there from August 11th through 14th. But seriously, this is the first back-to-back they've had since then. They only had, with that 4-game win streak, there was only one other instance of winning back-to-back games in the month of August. Talk about the dog days of summer, the Reds were flattened by them. And quite frankly, the way that they won this second game of the back-to-back is because of the lineup. The lineup provided a lot of great at-bats, and it was led by Santiago Espinal. He is now up to 270 on the batting average this season, and he's slugging over 400. He's at 404. Remember the first month of the season after the Reds had surprisingly acquired him in a trade just before the season began, and there was a lot of folks that were like, who is this guy? He's batting $150. Why do we need him? Get him out of here. We're done with him. I'm really glad they didn't do that, because he has been phenomenal. In fact, you know what? Consider this. We're going to do a fun little blind comparison here. You know I love blind comparisons. So we're going to do a blind comparison since July 8th. Player A, since July 8th, is hitting .419 with an on-base percentage of .460 and a slugging percentage of .638. So, since July 8th, Player A has slashed .419, .460, .638. That's awesome. Player B, since July 8th, has a .366 batting average, .429 on base, .704 slugging. So, more slugging than Player A, but everything else is lower. Again, blind comparison, Player A, Player B. Do you know who I'm talking about? Player A is Santiago Espinal, and Player B, who Player A is better than, at least since July 8th, is Bobby Witt. Okay, now there are a few qualifiers here, and obviously Santiago Espinal is not better than Bobby Witt, but it's kind of funny to consider some numbers for a minute. I can make statistics say whatever I want them to say, by the way. That's how that worked there. But for players that have more than 100 at-bats since July 8th, Santiago Espinal is first in the major leagues in batting average. Nobody has a better batting average than him, who's had at least 100 at-bats during that time. And it's crazy to think of how well he has played. And he had a clutch hit yesterday against the Astros that gave the difference in the game, gave them the 2 runs that they needed to win. But I really find that the more and more we watch Santiago Espinal, the more and more I'm kind of impressed. I'm not saying that he should be pushing for a starting nod next year, but he is a guy that definitely deserves to be on this roster. He'll be 30 next year, but the Reds have him for 2 years of arbitration control. His final 2 years of arbitration are 2025 and 2026. So he's not a free agent until after the 2026 season. And no, he's not going to hit 400. I get that. I'm not saying that. But he has brought his season up. Like, his season statistics now actually look pretty respectable. Like, wouldn't you love a dude on the bench like Santiago Espinal? Like, if you said you got a guy on the bench right now that he has a 270 batting average and he slugs over 400, you'd take that. That's the kind of guy you can work with. And not to give too much credit, I mean, he does have time in the outfield now, but he's a utility infielder. We're not going to list him as an outfielder. The Reds have literally been playing Santiago Espinal in the outfield because they were just out of options with other guys because they didn't go get other outfielders. I don't know why, but that's not that's not Santiago Espinal's fault. They just put an opportunity in front of him. And quite frankly, he's not that great at fielding in the outfield, but he'll go stand out there if you need him to. But I'm getting away from the point. Santiago Espinal is the kind of guy that I trust on the Reds bench moving forward. And he really led a very good game. This lineup, there's a bit of a renaissance for the lineup on Monday night. Consider they faced Justin Verlander. And sure, we're not talking about Justin Verlander in his prime. It is clear that he is in decline, but he is still good. I'd still take him on the Reds pitching staff, and that's without the injuries. I'd still take him on a healthy Reds pitching staff. But Monday night, the Reds were able to hang 8 hits and get 4 walks off of Verlander and put 5 on the scoreboard on him. That's some good at-bats. And joining Santiago Espinal was Ty France. For one night in the 2024 season, Reds fans could be, man, thank God for Santiago Espinal and for Ty France. Thank you so much. 4 for 4 for Ty France. Had a double. And actually, let's consider him for a moment. Ty France as a Red. Remember, he was a trade deadline acquisition that whenever the Reds traded for him, we were like, all right, whatever. We need depth. In his 29 games as a Red, he has a 284 batting average, a 346 slugging, and a 346 on base percentage, and a 453 slugging. His OPS plus, a number that we love to use when we're talking about hitters. Again, tiny sample size here in 29 games, but during the 29-game stretch, he has an OPS plus of 119. It's not bad, and really in the grand scheme of things, that OPS plus puts him at 3rd on the team. Well, technically re-signs as a 215, and Austin Wins as a 167. But again, we're talking about minuscule, tiny sample sizes here, so we're not going to go too crazy. But here's a fun one for you. In 29 games, we're not going to do a blind comparison. I won't do another one. 2 in 1 segment. Oh, goodness, Jeff. You're going crazy there. You're trying to throw it all together like Marvel or something. 29 games just so happens to be the number of games that CES has played this year. Ty France and CES have played, at least going into Wednesday's game against the Astros. Ty France will probably play, and he'll get more than CES. But at this moment in time, CES, Ty France, 29 games. CES hit 190, 220 on base, and 293 slugging. I get it. He was hurt. He was playing through some stuff. But that puts Ty France into perspective a little bit. Like, hard to complain about that when the guy that we figured whose position it was to lose had a really rough season. And by the way, without looking, I don't know if you looked, who had more homers in those 29 games? Ty France. Ty France has 3. CES had 2. We're not going to dig into that any deeper because that's pretty depressing. But still, just to put Ty France into perspective a little bit. And one other thing to put into perspective, Elly de la Cruz drew 2 walks. He didn't have any hits. Didn't go crazy. If you took the Elly parlay on Monday night, it didn't work. But Elly drew 2 walks. He has 61 walks on the season. Jonathan India, who has become a wizard with the strike zone and plate discipline and pitch recognition and all that stuff, he has 66 walks this year. Spencer Steer, who we knew coming into the season, very good plate discipline, has 63 walks this year. Elly has 61. And now you're probably thinking, well, Jeff, he's got way more strikeouts than any of those guys. And yes, he does. But that's not to say that he doesn't see pitches. I think he gets some weird calls sometimes, and it forces him to swing at some odd pitches that he wouldn't otherwise swing at, but he's still taking walks. We're not talking about a dude that doesn't know the strike zone here. Elly does. But hey, good night for the lineup, and just, let's just keep seeing more of the same from Santiago Espinal, who is absolutely part of the plan next year. But you know the Reds have a multitude of injuries that they are working through, and we'll look at who is close to returning, if anybody, coming up next. You're running out of chances to get down to the ballpark, and the best way to do that is with Game Time. Game Time has the best last-minute deals on tickets to Reds games, to Bengals games as Bengals season gets started this week, and all other kind of sporting events. Plus, you can go to, theatrical performances and different sort of musical events. All kinds of stuff are over at Game Time, but my favorite way to do it is with the Reds, because you just go down to the banks, you hang out, you wait till close to first pitch, and Game Time has all these great deals that you can take advantage of. Plus, they have views from your seats, so you know exactly what you're going to be looking at when you sit down. If you go to a different ballpark that's not Great American Ballpark, you can feel confident in your ticket. Just download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll even get $20 off your first purchase on top of their last-minute deals. Again, download the app, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for making Locked On Reds your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully over on Locked On MLB. He has it covered every single day, and he has it all on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And speaking of everyday, shout out to our everydayers out there. If you are not an everydayer, make sure you become one by clicking the subscribe button on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app if you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, and sometimes you're driving and then all this other stuff and you can't watch on YouTube, take us with you on your favorite podcasting app. We are available there. I really don't know of any that we aren't on, so it's kind of nice. But for our everydayers, coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, will there be any changes to the Reds organization after this season? Talking about the leadership of the organization. We'll discuss that coming up on the next Locked On Reds. But let's do a couple of injury updates here, because we've been talking about the patchwork pitching staff, which, looking at it, looks like Nick Martinez is going to go today. We're going to see Rhett Lauder on Thursday. Getting my days all mixed up with the weird off day in the middle. But Rhett Lauder on Thursday, I would assume that means that we will see Friday would be Brandon Williamson, and then Saturday would be Julian Aguilar. It looks like we're starting to get a little bit more of a regular rotation. That's kind of a nice feeling, which makes you wonder, how quickly will we see Hunter Greene and Andrew Abbott added back to that rotation? Well, unfortunately, there aren't really sort of concrete timelines for their return. There were some updates, though, because Hunter Greene is currently playing catch, just throwing on flat ground, not actually throwing off of a mound or anything like that. His throwing program has not begun yet. They're hoping that that will begin soon, and he will progress back to returning to the team. But again, that is TBD. Did get a third opinion, Hunter Greene did, on his elbow. And for a third time, they found no ligament damage. So he literally has 3 concrete medical opinions telling him he does not need any sort of surgery on his elbow and that it's only inflammation. So they're waiting on the inflammation to go down and then they can move forward. But it's not like that situation where, like we're waiting for inflammation to go down and then we'll find if there's broken bones in there. They don't expect any broken bones, but they do not expect surgery as well. Third opinion says that. Man's got to get 3 opinions, my gosh. On the Andrew Abbott side, he still kind of feels a pinch, at least according to the last report. He feels a pinch in his shoulder, but is due to begin a throwing program this week. So once he begins that, how he reacts to that, that's where we will get the update and the feelings on like timelines and all that other stuff. Suffice it to say, though, we won't know anything until then. We don't know anything about Hunter Greene, so they're still up in the air. Hopefully, both can return at some point here in September and relieve us of any more bullpen games. There was one other one, and I found this kind of interesting because we constantly hear that there's almost like an injury, will they or won't they? Is Matt McLain coming back or not? And I found this update to be a little bit intriguing because McLain's shoulder was previously cleared for swinging a bat. But David Bell noted that Matt McLain is still getting tested to determine the root cause of the pain that he is still having in his side. Remember, there was kind of a report, and this was back on August 12th. He was supposed to have a rehab assignment that started back then, but it was delayed because of a rib cage stress reaction. He's trying to come back, from March surgery that repaired a labrum and cartilage damage in his shoulder. I continue to say, don't do it. We'll see you in Goodyear. I don't know at what point now. Like, I don't think it would be a prudent decision. If Matt McLain were to start his rehab tomorrow, I don't think it would be a prudent decision to fast track that and bring him back for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of baseball. What are we going to gain out of that? And I've said that about some other players and said, well, it would be nice to see them healthy. And I am very happy to see Brandon Williamson back on the mound just to see him healthy here. But I don't necessarily know that would be good for Matt McLain. I think it's different with pitchers and with position players. So I find it hard to believe that this would help Matt McLain. Still trying to rush and get him back. I say shut him down. Have him have a nice offseason where he slowly ramps up, gets ready for spring training, and we'll see him in Goodyear next year. A couple other updates. Quite frankly, there's not really any reports of anybody coming back anytime soon, and most of these updates are telling you why they're not coming back at all. Nick Lodolo, I would be surprised. And the update on, and I'm getting these updates from MLB.com, Reds beat writer Mark Sheldon. His update on Nick Lodolo is possibly September. I don't think so. He's in the middle of his timeline where he has his middle finger. Remember, he strained a ligament in his middle finger, but it's in a splint right now. And it had to be in a splint. This was back from August 27th. Had to be in a splint for 2 weeks. So we're still in the middle of that time frame. Then once the splint comes off, they'll figure out exactly what happens after that. I got to believe that his season's over. And that's unfortunate because it felt like he could show us some stuff in the final month. But at this point, there's another week of having the splint on his finger. And then after the splint comes off, he'll have to do a throwing program, ramp back up, maybe take him a week or two to do that. And so you're talking about 2, maybe 3 starts if everything goes according to plan, period, and it goes really fast. Might only be talking about 1 or 2 starts at that point. I don't know that you can prove anything to me in 1 or 2 starts, so I say shut him down. Stuart Fairchild, He's done. He's having surgery on that thumb to repair a torn UCL, which I thought was interesting. Whenever this injury was reported, I'm like, I haven't heard about this like ever. And lo and behold, that was Nick Martini's injury. I thought it was a broken thumb on Nick Martini, but Nick Martini had a torn UCL repaired in his thumb as well. And I don't think we'll see Nick Martini. We're definitely not going to see Stuart Fairchild. But expectation is he'll be ready for spring training, which would be good. Would also be a reason why the Reds wouldn't do anything in the outfield. I really hope that's not the case. And then Edwin Arroyo, I like this one because he's actually starting to progress to game action. And the reason that he's doing that is he is going to play in the Arizona Fall League. Obviously, the minor league season is pretty much done for everybody. Some playoffs coming up for Dayton and for other minor league teams. But Edwin Arroyo would be ready to go for the Arizona Fall League, so he will be able to get some at-bats in, get some reps in out in the field, and get ready for next spring training. I don't think that puts him, in contention for the opening day roster. I'm not sure that I would see him being called up next year. And quite frankly, if we were in an environment where Edwin Arroyo could be called up in 2025, it's probably because things have gone horribly wrong in 2025. So I don't want to see that. I don't think we'll see him in 2025 in the majors, but I do want to see him progress through the minor leagues, looking good at the plate, looking good in the field, things like that. But hopefully we'll see him there soon. He's also, of course, recovering from from surgery on his labrum in his shoulder that he suffered that injury back in spring training as well. And Graham Ashcraft began a throwing program, but the Reds are only doing this in hopes that he can have a normal offseason schedule. This will not be a situation where it's like, yeah, let's bring him back for a couple of games or something like that. They're not going to do that with him. They're bringing him along so that hopefully they're like, okay, we can sign off. The arm is good to go. Go have a normal offseason. We'll see you in Goodyear. And hopefully for that. One dude, I got to figure out exactly what his future looks like. Ian Gibaut. It looks like he's done for the year, man, but there have literally been no updates on him since his last setback. And he's having a nerve problem in his forearm. And it's not like, he strained his forearm or something like that. I thought that was the initial report, but the report was he's having nerve problems in his forearm. Don't know too many cases like that, so don't think we see him this year. I don't know what that means for him next year. I think his contract is up, so maybe he comes back on a minor league deal, but we may not see any more of Ian Gibaut, which is a bummer. I got to meet him. He was kind of a nice guy, but yeah, not great injury updates on the whole. It's great news that Hunter Greene does not need Tommy John surgery, and he got a third opinion to that point, but we don't know when he will return in 2020. Coming up next, were we wrong to expect so much from this team this year? You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you today because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, not just new customers, but all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 weeks of a free trial for NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. With FanDuel, you can check out all the great prop bets. We always talk about the Elly parlay. You take Elly to get at least a steal, score at least a run, and get at least 2 total bases in any given game. Usually the odds on that are about 4-1 or 5-1, and you can get some money off that because Elly's been doing that all season long. Quite a few times, actually. If you've been taking that as much as I told you, you'd be up in money. So check that out over at FanDuel. Put $5 on it, and you'll get 3 weeks free of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. Check it out today over at FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. Also, make sure you bookmark CincinnatiRedsTalk.com for written content about your Cincinnati Reds. All right, I've been thinking about this for a little bit, and bear with me here. We'll tie it into a bunch of different stuff going on this season. But I kind of wondered a little bit because everydayers will know that I'm very positive about the Cincinnati Reds. I like to view Reds baseball from the optimistic lens, Reds colored goggles, if you would. I don't love to defend the organization at all costs. Like, if everything looks bad, we'll talk about that. And that's why this year has been such a heavy year for me. Because coming into this season, I had more expectations. I had higher hopes, probably than I ever have. Definitely as the host of this podcast. And I looked at the talent on the field and then the different exciting factors that could come into play. And I said, surely the negative sides, the counterpoints, and we're worried about this and all this other stuff. Surely not all that stuff will all happen at once. And it kind of did. And that's kind of been the hardest thing for me, is that 2023 for the Cincinnati Reds felt like a renaissance. Felt like we were coming out of the muck. We were done with these, awful 90 lost seasons and stuff, which has made 2024 feel like a recession. Gordon Whitmire had an article in the Inquirer yesterday that I read, and I know that there's a lot of Reds fans that don't love Gordon Whitmire's content because they kind of felt like he came into town, a Cubs fan who doesn't like the Reds, and he's going to look at every negative possible point for the Reds and all this other stuff. I have read him as a great counterpoint to my optimism for the team. I don't have any ill thoughts about his content or anything like that. And so I've appreciated everything that he has done. And I really appreciated the article that he wrote because he kind of said it plainly. He's like, the Reds have spent 6 months proving to us that they're a bad team. And they have just as likely a chance to lose 90 games as they do to have a 500 or better record, to say nothing of the playoffs. The playoffs are pretty much a foregone conclusion that the Reds will not make those this year. And coming into this season, that sentence and that idea to me just seemed so far out of the realm of possibility. I'm not going to say that I thought the Reds were too big to fail, because quite frankly, they have never proven that they deserve that sort of a feeling from me or from anybody, no matter how positive or negative you are about the team. But that feeling was close to me. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this season. I know you're disappointed because I'm disappointed. We saw this season, we said, all right, if Elly can become a star and if the Reds can figure out having an ace, it feels like that's all they need to do. Because it feels like Spencer Steer's going to be a consistent middle of the order force for them. It feels like TJ Friedl is Captain Chaos at the top of the order. And mostly that was also wrong too, mostly just because he couldn't stay healthy. Jonathan India has been a bright spot. Love to see that. And Tyler Stevenson has too. But CES, Noelvi Marte, Jamer Candelario, why did they get him? Jake Fraley has lost his power. Rake has been far more rare this season than we thought he would be. And Will Benson has completely disappeared on me. I just, that's been the hardest thing about this, is that instead of, and I remember saying this in spring training, I said, I don't think everything will go right, but I think most things will go right. Instead, not everything went wrong, but most things went wrong. Probably 70% of the scenarios that we were hoping for all went on the negative side. And so with that, it just makes me wonder, like, do I evaluate baseball differently, or was so much of this so fluky that I can't go into next season feeling any sort of optimism? Because I don't think that's true. I do think there were some guys that had some sophomore slumps, but we'll see them re-emerge next year. I still believe that Spencer Steer is a consistent hitter in the middle of this lineup. And while he hasn't been that this year, he definitely can get back to that next year. And I really do feel like Christian Encarnacion Strand has more to show us. I'm a little worried about Noelvi Marte, to be honest with you. We did not see him very much in 2023, and I definitely jumped to some conclusions based on a far too small sample size. Now we're seeing a much bigger sample size for Noelvi Marte, and it ain't very good. Because I want to know exactly how the Reds are going to supplement this. There's a lot of folks out there, and Gordon Whitmire's column would kind of point to this being his feeling, that almost believe that none of the positivity ascribed to this team after 2023 was earned. I still think that there is some. But what does that mean for this team moving forward? I'd be interested in your thoughts, and I probably should have asked you for this a lot earlier on in the show, but let me know in the comments section, or hit me up on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. What are your thoughts about this team? And where, compared to where we know reality is today on Tuesday, September 3rd, and where you thought we would be back on March 25th. Picked a day that I safely thought was before opening day. So, back in March, where'd you think we were going to be? And how disappointed are you on September 3rd? Because short a crazy winning streak and conversely a very weird losing streak from both the Braves and the Mets, don't see the Reds getting back in this. So questions need to be asked this offseason. We're going to dive into some specific questions that the Reds really need to ask their management staff at the end of this year. We're going to do that on tomorrow's podcast, so make sure you join us for that. I'd be curious of your specific questions that you would have too. Make sure you hit us up in the comment section about that. But yeah, I mean, this season is a wild disappointment. And they have a shot to be like a 500 ball club, which some of my prop bets I'd be happy about. But at this point, I just want to see them finish out the year strong. They've got to go. They are, what is it, 15 wins. They have to win 15 of their remaining games to get to 81 wins. Feels like a lot. And it feels like it's disappointing, I got to say that. But hey, as the season moves along and as we go into the offseason, I want to invite you to become a Locked On Reds insider, because we're going to text and talk about the Reds every single day. If you text the word insider to 513-597-0944, you'll get a free 14-day trial to see what it's all about. We're just talking Reds baseball, man, on a text message. Get a direct text line to me. After that free 14-day trial, it's $4.99 a month. Become that friend that everybody asks about the Reds, and you're like, yeah, I know. And text with me about the Reds every single day by texting the word insider to 513-597-0944 right now. But that'll wrap us up for this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much for making it part of your day. If you're an everydayer, thank you so much. If you're not, make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcasting app, because we will be here with you every single day, because we are Locked On Reds every single day.